to be here with everybody. I was looking at the calendar, going, oh my goodness, it's almost Shavuos already. And I want to get through Ketuvim. I want to get through the writings so we can start off fresh next year. Back to the beginning, I guess. We'll figure it out. So we're going to move on to, I think we need a week for Ezra, a week for Nahemia, before we get on to Chronicles. So, yeah. My internet connection is not so great. Does everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Good, okay. Every once in a while from my office, the internet connection gets a little bit wonky. But so far, so good. So, has anyone heard of Ezra before?
The name?
The name, yeah. It's Ezra, our good friend Ezra, right?
Yes.
So, Ezra actually is interesting that he usually gets followed by his good friend Nehemiah or Nahemia, however one wants to say it. They usually put together Ezra and Nahemia, which is actually the case because the books themselves were actually combined for a good part of the early history. But they were eventually divided up into two separate books, Ezra and Nehemiah, as opposed to just one book together. The reason why they were linked is because they basically tell a very similar story. They're coming at it from a different angle, which is post-exilic Judaism, basically. So it picks up around the Persian period, where the decree is said, hey, all of you Jews here in Babylon, now that the Persians have taken over, if you want to stay, great. Sei gesund, you can stay. You can have a nice time with us here. But if you want to go back home, it's been 50 years, but if you want to go back home, rebuild the temple, you can do that too. You'll be all right if you want to go back. And so Ezra and Nehemia, they were both leaders during that time period. Each of them, again, from a different perspective, but they were each leaders during this time period. Ezra was more of the religious authority, sort of the scribe, the scholar, where Nehemia was more of the political entity. He was very involved in security and military, but you need them both in order to have a functioning society. And so probably, not definitely, but probably, these books were written at a very similar time and very much close to the time of the events actually taking place. So not exactly the same, not contemporaneous, but close enough. So like we're talking about the events it's describing is late 6th century. These books are probably written 5th century, maybe early 4th. But not too far beyond what the events they describe. And so there is some historical knowledge there. The narrative itself, you'll see a little bit of a pattern. There's a lot of talk at the beginning of the chapters about a Persian king saying, hey, let's get to work, let's do something, whatever it might be. Or there'll be some letters, some missives being sent back and forth. And eventually, the Jewish leaders, they have opposition to rebuilding the temple, to whatever their plans are, but then things are good. There's success, they're victorious. It's usually get a lot of political maneuvering, and they're okay. It's not as much blood, guts, and gore as other books. Here's a lot of, I'm going to send you a letter, and I'll send you a letter in reply. So it's not sort of the same. The swords are mostly sheathed in this book. It contains, outside of Daniel, the most Aramaic of any book in the Bible. Actually, chapters 4 through 6 are written exclusively in Aramaic. So we know the book is late. Aramaic is eventually going to become vernacular for the Israelites, so that's what they're going to use in day-to-day conversation. Hebrew is going to be moved more towards liturgical language for prayer. But if you go to the shop, you're speaking Aramaic. That's going to be the language, for the Israelites for a long time. It's going to be Aramaic. We talked about that already. Talked about that. Yeah, there's a lot of conflict with neighboring peoples. Didn't get along so well. Ezra and Nahemia to perhaps overuse a cliche from our time period. Really wanted to make Israel great again, and they really sort of had that viewpoint, that perspective of it's all about Israel, right? Or very Israel centric. We don't want to hear from other people. Very isolationist, very separatist, okay? With a very significant consequence of that coming at the end of Ezra, which maybe we'll get to today, when it speaks about his viewpoints on other people coming into the community. He wanted to close the borders, okay, and don't let anyone else in. He really was very much Israel-centric. Did not want other peoples around them because he was worrying about a corrupting influence. That somehow it would make the community less spiritually pure, because he remembers the days, at least from tales of yore, how the Israelites turned to idolatry. They were sinning before God, and they got exiled, right, for their sins. And so he thinks a way to keep that from happening is to ensure that no other foreign influences permeate the Israelite experience. And so he has a pretty extremist view when it comes to other folks. And Nehemiah, for a good portion of his book, builds a wall. Right. Some things don't change. Okay, so with all of that said, we're going to pick up with chapter 1 here of Ezra. We're going to skip around a little bit because some of these books are literally just names for, pages upon pages of just names. And that's less fun than other things. So let's start out, Sharon, from the very beginning, a very good place to start.
Okay.
In the first year.
Hold on, let me just get my side-by-side. In the first year of King Cyrus of Persia, when the word of the Eternal spoken by Jeremiah was fulfilled, the Eternal roused the spirit of King Cyrus of Persia to issue a proclamation throughout his realm by word of mouth and in writing as follows. Thus said King Cyrus of Persia, the eternal God of heaven has given me all the kingdoms of the earth and has charged me with building God a house in Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Any one of you, of all God's people, may his God be with him, and let him go up to Jerusalem, that is in Judah, and build the house of the eternal God of Israel, the God that is in Jerusalem, and all who stay behind, wherever he may be living, let the people of his place assist him with silver, gold, goods, and livestock, besides the free will offering to the house of God that is in Jerusalem.
Right, so not bad. Okay, King Cyrus doing his thing, saying, hey, you know what? You want to go home? Go for it, because God has actually given me the task. God has told me that it's a good idea to let the Israelites go back and build a house in Jerusalem, build a temple up again. So anyone who wants to go, may God be with you. Again, pack your stuff and head on out. And if you're not going to go, if you're going to stay here and sort of schlep around in Persia, you know what? Pony up some dough. Give a little bit of money here, let's see those shekels flying here a bit. Give them some gold, some silver, some livestock. Give them an ox, whatever. Give them something as a parting gift. That way, when they go, they'll have supplies. They'll have things that they need to rebuild the temple. So if you're gonna go, great. That's a good thing to do. If you're gonna stay, maybe you pay for the people who are leaving, so they can have an easier time of it. Makes sense. Nice. Thanks, Cyrus. We appreciate it. As a note, Cyrus is mentioned in the book of Isaiah as God's anointed one. That God has chosen Cyrus for this task. And the Hebrew word for anointed one is Mashiach, Messiah. And so Cyrus is actually called Messiah in that it's not the same context as the word's going to become later, but the idea of being sort of God's anointed one to rebuild. Sharon, you want to give me a little more here? So the chiefs?
Mm-hmm. So the chiefs of the clans of Judah and Benjamin, excuse me, and the priests and Levites, all whose spirit had been roused by God, got ready to go up to build the house of the Eternal that is in Jerusalem. All their neighbors supported them with silver vessels, with gold, with goods, with livestock, and with precious objects, besides what had been given as a free will offering.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so again, it basically says, and they did it. It's a long way of saying, and they did it. Sounds good. They all went and they did. Okay, Linda White, do you want to pick up here? King Cyrus?
King Cyrus of Persia released the vessels of the Eternal's house, which Nebuchadnezzar had taken away from Jerusalem and had put in the house of his God. This King Cyrus of Persia released through the office of Mithredath, the treasurer, who gave an inventory of them to Shebazar, the prince of Judah.
Indeed, you get some of the fun names there. Yes, thank you for that. That was well done. Some of these ridiculous names. So, because Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonians, when they came in, they took all the vessels, right? All the different sacred objects from the temple, and so they kept them and put them in different places. Now they say, you know what? Let them take it and let them go. All this gold and silver and whatever it is. What you're going to see next is a lot of lists here. So we're not going to go over all these lists. So, but basically, here's the inventory, some basins, some more basins, some knives, some bowls, some more bowls, more vessels, lots of gold and silver stuff, very pretty. And then on chapter 2, you're going to get, and these are all the people who returned to Judah. And as you see, you get a lot of people. The sons of Parosh, the sons of Shephatiah, the sons of Arah, the sons of for a while. Got some priests coming. Got the priests, got the Levites, got the singers, got the gatekeepers. All these names, which we don't have to go over, but basically all these folks are packing up their bags. This is very exciting, I know, and coming back to Israel, coming back to Judah proper, and all of their stuff. So they schlepped all their stuff with them, and now they're back. Huzzah! Okay, Linda, you want to give me another paragraph here? When the 7th month?
When the 7th month arrived, the Israelites being settled in their towns, the entire people assembled as one man in Jerusalem. Then Jeshua, son of Zadok, and his brothers priests, and Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, and his brothers set to and built the altar of the God of Israel to offer burnt offerings above it, as is written in the teachings of Moses, the man of God.
There you go. Once again, got you some of those fun names. But these are the, so basically what it's saying is the priestly class, right? The people who are descended from the priests, they are now going to work as priests. So you see this name over here. Where's my pointer? Here we go. Josadic, whatever it is. If you look at the Lashley family sort of name, those 3 letters there, that was pretty much the priestly class. And if you've ever heard the term Sadducees, okay, it comes from these letters, right? The transliteration is different, but the Sadducees are the ones who ran the temple, the priestly caste, the priestly order. So it comes from these names here. So if you ever see those letters, that's Tzadok, that's the priestly order, the priestly class. Purportedly Aaron's, great grandchildren, so to speak. And so these priests are all setting it up, right? So they can have sacrifices again. They can have offerings again. So they're rebuilding. That's one of the first things they do, right? Is they assemble and they're able to offer their offerings once more. Huzzah, huzzah. Good times. Debbie Siegel, you want to pick up over here?
Okay. They set up the altar on its site because they were in fear of the peoples of the land, and they offered burnt offerings on it to the Eternal, burnt offerings each morning and evening. Then they celebrated the Festival of Tabernacles, as is written, with its daily burnt offerings in the proper quantities on each day as it is prescribed for it, followed by the regular burnt offering and the offerings for the new moons and for all the sacred fixed times of the Eternal, and whatever free will offerings were made to the Eternal. From the first day of the 7th month, they began to make burnt offerings to the Eternal, though the foundation of the temple of the Eternal had not been laid.
Mhm.
Yeah, so they haven't gotten there yet, right? But they're working on it. And one of the first things they do is, again, try to build the temple, right? So they have the altar, and they're offering now sacrifices morning and evening, right? So they're trying to get back into the groove from 50 plus years ago. And they started celebrating the festivals, right? They got Sukkot. Sukkot's back, and it's better than ever. The Festival of Tabernacles, right? So they have Sukkot, and they're doing the Sukkot, and they're also doing Rosh Chodesh. They're doing the Festival for the New Moons, and all the holidays, all those sacred fixed times of the Eternal. And so what are they doing? They are reinstituting a holiday calendar, right? We spoke about this a little bit during the second night Seder. If we remember the idea that one of the Israelites, one of the first things that God commands the Israelites before they even leave Egypt, right, is what? It's the creation of a calendar, right? It's the creation of festival times, things to celebrate, because eventually the people of Israel, the children of Israel, so to speak, are going to need to have an Israel calendar, basically, their own times, their own rhythms. They have to dance to the Israelite beat. They can't dance to the Egyptian beat anymore. And it's the same thing here, right? Where there's a Babylonian calendar and there's a Persian calendar, and there's just different ways they've been living their lives. Now you want to have your own calendar back, your own festivals, your own holidays, your own sacred times, and to mark them as you would normally mark them. So here's my
was the altar put where the old first temple was? Because
according to tradition,
was destroyed, but the foundation probably was still there.
Yeah, well, they say that the entire thing was burned down and destroyed, and so they're rebuilding on that site. So they have to rebuild everything, even though there might be some. If you've ever been to Israel, right, you've been to the Western Wall tunnels underneath the Kotel, right? And if you go down far enough in the Western Wall tunnels, you have some of that foundation that's still there from the first temple period. So one can imagine, that there might be some stones, something that might have been there, from the first temple period. But a lot of it had to be completely rebuilt and renovated. And then it'd be renovated again, during the Roman period. It would be rebuilt during Herod's time. It would be amplified in a much greater way. Talking about sort of Israel rhythms and holidays and whatever it is, in Israel, because it's the Jewish calendar, the Hebrew calendar, so to speak, in Israel, you have a different sense of your Jewishness, I find, when you're there, because the way time is measured is really Jewish time, right? Friday night and Saturday, right? That's Shabbat. It's a different feel when you're in Israel because you are going by their calendar more than the Gregorian calendar that we're all so used to. It makes me think about this time of year in particular, and so if I have, forgive me. But I just remember there was one Friday, and it's a quiet day because it's Friday, we're getting ready for Shabbos. So we decided to take a little constitutional. We take a little walk to the old city. We like visiting the old city when we had a chance to. We would go sometimes to the Christian Quarter, and we would have a little lunch maybe, take a little walk, see some of the sights. And we went to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. We went to that area, and it was just packed beyond what we'd ever seen it. It was just so crowded. And we're looking at each other, and there's processionals going in, and it's a whole Megillah, so to speak. We're looking at each other going, what the heck's going on here? We've been here so many times. It's never been this crowded. All of a sudden we go, wait a minute. It's Good Friday. That's what this Friday is. It's Good Friday. Because in Israel, who cares? Like, it's not, something that they deal with, in the Israeli papers, whatever it is in the Hebrew calendar. You don't go, oh, it's Good Friday, on your calendar, because it's not written there really in the same way, because it's a different way. Like, my kids were off last week, right, for a couple of days, for a Holy Thursday, and Good Friday and whatever it is. They were off school, and I don't know from it. I'm not paying attention to it in the same way, but it's there. In Israel, because you're working through Hebrew time, so to speak, Jewish time, all the holidays, it's so different celebrating Hanukkah there, because every 3 yards you are seeing a Christmas tree or a manger. You don't have that in Israel the same way. You got menorahs everywhere. On Sukkot, you have the actual sukkah, like, everywhere. You turn. It's a much different feeling when you feel like you're dancing to the beat sort of your own cultural rhythm as a majority population. And the only way you can do that is in Israel, and so here, I think it's very important for the children of Israel, so to speak, the people who are returning to Israel, is that they want to start getting their own calendar back. They want to start getting that feeling of governing themselves, going to their own pace, their own holidays, their own festivals, and worshiping them in their, at that time, proper place, which was in the land itself and at the site of the temple. So I think that's why it's such a focus here in Ezra, because it really is about the restoration, right, of the cultic worship, right, of being able to perform our rituals, our ways, in our own place, at our own time. And for Ezra, that was a really big focus on getting us back to what we were doing before it all went wrong. And now we got to get back to when things are supposed to be better. Okay. Debbie, you want to give me one more here? They paid
the hewers and the craftsmen with money, and the Sidonians and the Tyrians with food, drink, and oil, to bring cedar wood from Lebanon by sea to Joppa, in accord with the authorization granted them by King Cyrus of Persia. In the second year after their arrival at the house of God at Jerusalem, in the second month, Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, and Jesua, son of Josedek, and the rest of their brother priests and Levites, and all who had come from the captivity to Jerusalem, at their first step appointed Levites from the age of 20 and upward to supervise the work of the house of the Eternal.
Very nice. So you see, again, the building continues. You got to pay, these workers, right? You have people hewing stone and wood. You have to give them a little bit of cash because no one works for free. You got to pay these people, and also give them a little falafel while you're there, right? A little food, a little drink, a little something, a little oil for them to get that good cedar. You got to get the good cedar from Lebanon, okay? That's where the cedar trees are. That's the best of the best. And you get them from where? They go to Joppa, as we would say Jaffa now, or Yaffo. Has anyone been there before?
No, we didn't.
So when you go to Israel, you go to Tel Aviv, and Tel Aviv is connected to the port city of Yaffo or Jaffa, depending on which mispronunciation you're going to use. But Jaffa, whatever it is. So that's the port city. It is gorgeous. I mean, like, it is just a great way to spend a day in Israel, is walking around that area. A lot of beautiful markets, really pretty, some historical sites as well. One of the best bakeries in Israel. I would know. Oh, Abu Lafia's Bakery, right? Yafo. Delicious. So good place to be. But I only mention it to the extent that it's still a port city now. You know, like it's still used for that purpose to bring in different things. Different now, of course, than in those times. But you can still see the boats sort of coming in. And so as they're building, right now we're already second year, right? We're already another year into this. You have the priests said, you know what? We need to get some helpers again. So who do we need? We need the Levites. We got to appoint Levites again because we're going to be doing sacrifices again. If you're going to do them, you need people to handle some of the grunt work, and that's the Levites. The Levites are going to be helpful. I mean, they're not the priests. Remember, the Kohanes are the priests, right? But the Levites are the helpers. You know, they're going to help fix things, to help sort stuff out. They also sing a little bit too, right? They're musical supposedly as well. So, you know, we need to get those people going again. Got to reinstitute the Levites. Okay, Bob, you want to pick up here?
Joshua, his sons and brothers, Kadmiel and his sons, the sons of Judah, together were appointed in charge of those who did the work at the house of God. Also, the sons of Anadad, their sons and brother Levites. When the builders had laid the foundation of the temple of the Eternal, priests in their vestments with trumpets and Levites, son of Asaph, with cymbals were stationed to give praise to the Eternal, as King David of Israel had ordained. They sang songs extolling and praising the Eternal, for he is good. His steadfast love for Israel is eternal. And the people raised a great shout extolling the eternal because the foundations of the house of the Eternal have been laid.
Thank you for that. It's interesting, right? So they've laid the foundations again. Now there's going to be music, right? You're going to have cymbals and trumpets. I feel like the first day may it happen sooner than later. Maybe the high holidays. I don't know what it'll be. But when we feel like we're really reopened again and like in a much larger way, that's what we should do. We should have cymbals and trumpets and, you know, maybe no animal sacrifice, but the rest of it is good. The rest of it we can sort of do. I don't want to kill a goat or something. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that we should have some, you know, big celebration moment. That's where it's a great shout, hooray, huzzah, we're back, you know. But that's what it felt for them, right? Because they were gone for so long. It's been a year for us. It was 50 for them, you know, 51, 52 years. And so now they're here, and it's like, huzzah, things are great, hallelujah, quite literally, hallelujah, you know. And they were just really happy to be back, to put it mildly. They were very happy to be back. Bob, you want to finish off here? Many of the priests?
Yeah, many of the priests and Levites and the chiefs of the clan, the old man who had seen the first house wept loudly at the sight of the founding of this house. Many others shouted joyously at the top of their voices. The people could not distinguish the shouts of joy from the people's weeping, for the people raised a great shout, the sound of which could be heard from afar.
Where the people who had seen, people who were maybe in their 70s, or in their 80s, whatever it might have been, who remembered the first one, right? The first temple, the first Beit HaMikdash, you know, now they're seeing the second one, they're seeing it founded. And it must have been a really powerful moment for them because they had lost something, right? That was so vital, so important to them. And now it's back, you know, and so they're weeping with joy. Others are screaming with joy and they're so happy. And you can't distinguish between the crying and the happy shouts because it's just one big cacophony of praise in a way, right? Of exaltation in this moment. It's a beautiful image. I mean, I really like the imagery, you know, of it. And again, reading this with like COVID eyes, so to speak, it gives a different perspective. to it. But this idea of, well, what does it mean to return, right? What does it mean to come back? Because we would never have imagined the situation we would have left. You know, like none of us were, aside from this pandemic, I can't think of a circumstance that would have been the case of not being back in the building, you know, by choice, right? You know, if something happens, God forbid, whatever it is, but, you know, it's just so bizarre to think about that on that level. And so reading this with those eyes, it's even more powerful in a way, you know, because of that pull, right, of return. Of what does it mean to come back when you miss something so much that you can't imagine, you know, that you'd ever have it again, which is their scenario, of course. But they have it back now. It's going to be a reality again. 50 years, a long time to wait. 10 more years and wandering in the wilderness. And that was a lot too. 40 years wasn't any great shakes. Okay.
I have a question.
Sure, please.
How come they were crying? So why were they weeping? Were they weeping for joy? It's not clear there.
Yeah, no, that's what I think it was. They were weeping happy tears, you know, or just feeling so overcome in that moment that they were just crying for joy in a way. Yeah, I think that's what it is. Always nice to cry for a happy reason.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know. And actually, Leah, you want to pick up right there with the adversaries?
You're giving every one of us a chance to read that word. Zero, or whatever. Okay, when the adversaries of Judah, Zerubbabel. Okay.
Yeah.
When the adversaries of Judah and Benjamin heard that the returned exiles were building a temple to the eternal God of Israel, they approached Zerubbabel and the chiefs of the clans and said to them, "Let us build with you, since we too worship your God, having offered sacrifices to God since the time of Ezra of Assyria, who brought us here."
Yeah, he thought Zerubbabel was bad enough.
Yeah.
You get Esarhaddon.
Oh, Esarhaddon. Okay. Zerubbabel, Jeshua, and the rest of the chiefs of the clan of Israel answered them, "It is not for you and us to build a house of our God, but we alone will build it to the eternal God of Israel, in accord with the charge that the King Cyrus of Persia laid upon us."
Yeah, and so now we get into some murky waters, you know, here, right? And now we have a little.
They didn't want to, but anyway, they found an excuse, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so like we got a little bit of a problem here. So what we have is that we have the Israelites are there, you know, or the returnees, right, are coming back home. But when they come back home, there were other people around, right? You know, the whole place wasn't vacated. You know, there were other people who were around living there for the past 50 years. Some of whom have said, look, you know, we've been here 50 years, and you know what? We practice Judaism, not only Judaism at this point, but Israel religion as well, right? We've still offered sacrifices. We're part of sort of the mixed multitude in such a way where the king of Assyria, so back to biblical history a little bit, 722 BCE, the Assyrian Empire is the bully on the block. They come and they knock off the northern kingdom of Israel. And what they do is while they do exile some people, what they do is they repopulate the area, right? And so they bring in exiles from other places and they put everyone into that northern kingdom of Israel. So it becomes basically a mixed multitude, as I said before. It becomes sort of a mixed bag. It doesn't have its own unique cultural identity anymore. Everyone is just sort of smushed together in this one place. So we have some folks who are living in this area now that are like, they have some Israelite leanings perhaps, but they are not, according to Zerubbabel at any rate, Israelite enough, right? They are not kosher, so to speak. They are people who are on the outside, not on the inside anymore of Israelite cultic worship and the Israelite community. So they're saying, hey, it's nice you want to be with us, but, no. Too much commingling, we don't know the sincerity of your beliefs. We don't want you around.
Sounds
Okay?
like the beginning of discrimination.
It's the beginning of, I would say, or maybe not even the beginning of, but the question of what constitutes Jewish identity. What constitutes Israelite identity, okay? So if you fast forward a couple thousand years, right, to the Ethiopian Jewish experience, right, that the Ethiopian community, when it was discovered, right, they didn't have the exact same experience, God knows, as other Jewish communities, right? They had Torah, that was clear, like they had Torah, but there was a question of their Jewishness. And so when they were brought over through Operation Solomon, through Operation Moses, they were brought over to Israel to make Aliyah, because they were accepted, right, as being able to return under right of return. When they came, they faced a very uphill battle that still continues today for acceptance in the greater Israel community, for a number of different issues, some of which should be patently obvious as to why there might be a little bit of a difference between Ethiopian Jews and Jews from other places. But there was, again, a question of legitimacy. Are you really part of us? And the answer, of course, was yes. But there were a lot of stuff there, to put it mildly, a lot of stuff there to overcome. And so in the same way here, they have these people saying, well, we're Jews too, we're Israelites too, and Zerubbabel's going, nope, no thank you, thanks but no thanks, hit the bricks, or don't hit the bricks, so help us rebuild, but get out of here, we don't want you, we don't want your help, which doesn't sit well, as we're going to see right now. Give me one more paragraph, Leah.
Thereupon the people of the land undermined the resolve of the people of Judah and made them afraid to build. They bribed ministers in order to thwart their plans all the years of King Cyrus of Persia and until the reign of King Darius of Persia. And the reign, oh, here's a good one. Oh,
Achashverosh.
Yeah, okay. At the start of his reign, they drew up an accusation against the inhabitants of Judah and Jerusalem. And in the time of okay, you say it.
Artaxerxes, Bishlam, Mithridates, Tabeel.
Did you do this on purpose?
No.
Okay. And the rest of their colleagues wrote King Artaxerxes
You got it.
Of Persia a letter written in Aramaic and translated Aramaic.
Yeah, so the Aramaic coming up next, right? So all those fun names notwithstanding. So the idea being is once they reject these people, right? Once they say, hey, you're not part of us, what do? Grrr, we don't like you anymore. Now we're going to write letters and protest, right? And so they're upset. And so now they're trying to undermine the building. They're going to talk to Cyrus. They're going to talk to, well, not Cyrus anymore because he's dead by now, but, to write to the new rulers and say, these Israelite people, they're sneaky. They're building this temple and we don't like it, and so they're going to send a nasty gram to the people of Persia, the kings of Persia, and say, maybe this isn't so kosher anymore. These people aren't doing the right thing.
This sounds exactly like where we live in Rockland County. This sounds like New Square, Kiris Joel, which is in Orange County, where the Orthodox community has built everything all around what used to be country. And Jewish people who live in that area are very against what these Orthodox communities have done to parts of Rockland and Orange County.
It's a lot of fighting about property. It's a lot of fighting about who gets to be where. And here it's again, the fight is who gets to call themselves an Israelite, who gets to be part of the community, who's in and who's out, right?
Well, could it be about the descendants? So you didn't spend 40 years in the desert. I did, my descent, I'm a descendant of someone who spent 40 years in the desert.
I think that's part of it, but it's also almost like you spent the last 50 years. It's when there's such a break, right, in the community. So you have the people who didn't have the experience of exile, right? They weren't in Persia. They didn't build those relationships anymore. It's almost like a family reunion of people who haven't seen each other in 50 years. Like, you're still family, but you've had different lives. You had different experiences. You've had different, different history at that point.
You didn't
all
suffer
the stories that you share with people that but all of a sudden, like, these people you haven't spoken to in 50 years are like, we want to be at the barbecue too. And you're like, yeah, you can come, but like, you're not really us anymore. You're sort of us, but it's no longer the same. There's a fissure. There's a break in a way, and so now they're culturally different.
Well, were they different? Was it the beginning of non-acceptance of converts?
So we're going to get to that.
Okay.
We're going to get to that question towards the end, because that is part of this conversation. But what does this mean for Gerim? What does it mean for converts? Yeah, so that is a very good question that this text struggles with in a way. Certainly. One can even say, as we get to the end of this text, that there is it's very polemical, right? It's taking up a viewpoint that basically says the insiders are the insiders, the outsiders are the outsiders, and never the two should meet. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure I'm not sure life can work that way. But that being said, it depends on who you ask, right? It depends on which community you're part of. Yes. And so here we're going to skip this a little bit, but this basically getting a nasty gram in Aramaic. So they're writing this letter to King Artaxerxes and saying, look, these Jews who came up from you, they're rebuilding this wicked city of Jerusalem. They're repairing the foundation. And let it be known, if this happens, they're not going to pay taxes. Sort of like a call to the Esther story in a way, right? Another Persian story, the Esther story, right? That there's this foreign people, these Jews, who aren't going to do the right thing. And in the end, it's going to harm the kingdom. We can't trust them. These very sneaky, shady Jews. You can't have them. It's going to be a problem if they continue to build their thing and have their own. What's I'm looking for? Have their own temple again, right? So it's going to be a problem. They're going to undermine the welfare of the government. Carolyn, you want to pick up here? Carolyn Gold. You hear me, Carolyn? Yeah, do you want to read? You're on mute though. Yeah, you'd have to unmute, Carolyn. You want to read? There you go.
Since we eat the salt of the palace, and it is not right that we should see the king dishonored, we have written to advise the king of this. so that you may search the records of your fathers and find in the records and know that this city is a rebellious city, harmful to kings and states. Sedition has been rife in it from early times, and on that account, this city was destroyed. We advise the king that if this city is rebuilt and its walls are completed, you will no longer have any portion in the province beyond the river.
Yeah, you see, so again, since we are such great subjects, since we are just so wonderful folks here, we don't want to see the king being hurt. It's not about the fact that we're all angry about being excluded, right? We're out of concern for Persia. We're going to let you know this is happening. Search it out for yourself. You'll see how seedy these Jews are, and how sedition runs rife here. And because they were so wicked the first time, that's why they got destroyed the first time, because they were so evil. And if they are able to accomplish this thing, then you're not going to get taxes anymore. They're not going to pay you heed. They're not going to pay you tribute. You're going to get garnished. You're going to get nothing from these Jews. So we can't have that. So the king gets this letter and writes a letter back to them, etc., etc., etc. Let me see here. And so he writes this letter back, right? So the king sent back the following message. Carolyn, you want to pick up here at the, hold on. At my order?
At my order, a search has been made, and it has been found that the city has, from earliest times, risen against kings, and that rebellion and sedition have been rife in it. Powerful kings have ruled over Jerusalem and exercised authority over the whole province of beyond the river, and tribute, poll tax, and land tax were paid to them. Now, issue an order to stop these men. This city is not to be rebuilt until I so order. Take care not to be lax in this matter, or there will be much damage and hurt to the kingdom.
So the king buys it. He goes, you know what? Maybe you're right. Maybe we got to just pump the brakes a little bit on all this temple building, because maybe it is going to be a problem, in fact. We got to do more research, right? We have to sort of go back into the archives. We got to check out what might be right, what might be wrong. We got to look. We got to give a little more attention, perhaps, than we had before. And so the people are actually able to stop the building. Right, and so they come, they come run and say, you can't build anymore. We got this letter, nanner, you can't build. It's very mature. And then everything stopped. Everything was in abeyance, right? They all had to stop until the next king comes into play here.
What about real estate?
And fixes it up. Yeah, it is. You got to build, They don't make any more land. You have to build on what you have. So real estate, very important. Okay, and so chapter 5, sort of continues the part of this story here, where the prophets, of Haggai and the prophet Zechariah, said, hey, this is what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be rebuilding. And so they begin to rebuild a little bit again. They began rebuilding with the full support of the prophets of God. But then you have this other dude comes in here, Tatanai, governor of the province of beyond the river, Shethar Bozenai, sure, why not? You see, I got to confuse them for myself here. They said, what's going on here? Who told you can rebuild again? We told you stop. We can stop it. No building for you. And they said, wait a minute, maybe we can build. But they're arguing now. They want to know their names. Who do you work for? Tell me your names. We're going to write you down. We're going to document all these people who are building here. And they go, they don't give them any names. They're not going to talk to them about that. So, God watches over the Jews here, and they keep on sort of building. So, again, they're trying to undermine them, right, and say, you shouldn't build anymore. They sent King Darius a letter, and says, hey, be it known that these Jews are building again. The work's all being done, it's going well. But they don't want to talk to us about it anymore. They don't want to let us know what's happening. We couldn't write down their names because they didn't give them to us. And said, you know who we are? Let me tell you who we are. You want to know our names? This is our name. We're servants of the God of heaven and earth. And we're building the house that was originally built many years ago. A great king of Israel built it and completed it. But because our God angered because our fathers angered the God of heaven, God handed them over to Nebuchadnezzar, who demolished the house, exiled the people. But Cyrus told us it's okay to come back. We're listening to Cyrus. He said you can come back, you can rebuild, and you can do this again. Take these vessels and go, right? And then we laid the foundations again and we're building, but it isn't finished yet. So you know what, Darius? Take a look in your files. Do a little internet search. Search all of your files here. You'll find that King Cyrus, your great-great-grandpa, told us it was okay to rebuild. As I said, not a lot of swords in this one. It's a lot of politics. So go, they're lobbying King Darius. Go find this order, and you'll see that it's all right for us to build again. So, of course, then Darius gets the letter, and he goes, okay, sure, let me look. Let me see if I can find this letter, find this scroll. And he finally found something in the citadel of Ecbatana, sure, in the province of Media, that there was a scroll, memorandum. I don't know if there's a Hebrew word for memorandum. I think it's a little bit of artistic license. Memorandum in Aramaic. Okay, in the word of Cyrus, Cyrus issues the order. So they find proof, right? They find the documentation. It's always good to have documentation. So they kept the work order from X number of years ago. And it's very specific.
Building
60
code.
cubits high, 60 cubits wide, unused timber, all the expenses paid by the palace, right? Not a bad deal. And go back and you can get to work. It's all right to do this again. And so they find proof. And so then he tells Tatanai, basically, stop bothering the Jews. Leave them alone. They got a good valid work permit here. Okay, it's binding, it's valid. Leave them alone. Allow the work to go on in the house of God. Let them rebuild. And you know what? Not only that, not only should you stop bugging them, stop hawking their china here, but you know what? Maybe help out a little bit. Grab a shovel, help out a little bit. Help them build the temple. Give them some money, give them some tax money to help expedite the building here. Get to work. Give it all that they need. Give them some bulls and some rams for burnt offering. Give them some wheat, salt, wine, and oil. Not bad at all. So they can have sacrifices again. And here we go. Darius is not messing around. I also issue an order that whoever alters this decree shall have a beam removed from his house, and he shall be impaled on it, and his house confiscated. Don't mess with the Persians. Do not mess with King Darius. He's laying down the law. And may God, who established God's name there, cause the downfall of any king or nation that undertakes to alter or damage the house of God in Jerusalem. So it shall be written, so it shall be done. Not exactly, but, Yul Brenner did have it right. Okay, and so Tatani goes, oh my God, this isn't good news. And so he does what he's told, as he should. And then the house is finished in Adar, third month of Adar, in the 6th year of the reign of Darius. Mazel tov for sacrificing bulls and rams and lambs and goats, purification of the thing. And we're having a grand old time back in the big T, back in the temple. We get to even celebrate Passover again. Huzzah! We get to have a Passover in the temple. More offerings and just a really good time worshiping once again as they had in the past. So they were able to subvert the will of those trying to undermine them. Okay, in a nutshell, that is Ezra. We're going to finish it off next week. We got to get to that ending part of the issues of separation that we have here. But that is Ezra, at least the first part of it in a nutshell. Any questions?
No.
The question is, how did they get all those names in there? My goodness.
How'd they think up those names?
Yeah.
It's fascinating. I mean, like, there's really, like, you know, if one really wants to spend an inordinate amount of wasted time, like to actually find out the derivations of some of these names, you know, maybe you'll find something interesting. I don't know. But a lot of it is just, like, some of the main ones are one thing, but some of these, like, Persian names and whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
they're just there, you know, some historical, some not historical. Like Artaxerxes exists, like that's a person, like, in the world that we know. Like Darius is a person that we know in the world. Cyrus too, from a historical standpoint. You know, others, a little less so, But you know, maybe a work of historical fiction, or you know, or maybe more charitably, the best they can remember. You know, the best they can remember some of these folks. 100 years maybe between when these things happened and when it was written.
Yeah.
So it's a long time.
A common name here, we'll use it.
Exactly. You know, like that'll work for us, right? So
Yeah, or let's put together 3 common names, make it 1.
the best is when you find, like, the Persian names in a Greek story, or, you know, or another story that's earlier, and you got to try to figure out, like, what's that doing there. Sometimes you have a little bit of a historical roadmap, because in the book of Numbers, you know, I was actually looking at this today for a different reason. You know, they have a lot of listing of names, and so you look at some of these names and going, these names sound mighty not Israelite, I'll put it that way. And you just sort of wonder where these names came from, because it feels anachronistic, you know. So it's like there are names. Like, you ever, like, sometimes you see this on Facebook or on other places, you know, like the 100 most popular babies' names, right? In the year 2000 is very different than what it was in the year 1900. Like there's, like, some names you don't see anymore in the same way. I had an aunt of blessed memory, Aunt Bertha, right? I have not met a Bertha in my life. I've never met a baby that was named Bertha. Now, Bertha, of course, is a derivation, you know, of Roberta, you know, other things. But I'm just saying that, like, there are some names you don't hear anymore. And so in the Bible as well, some of these names are a little bit, you don't know where they come from.
Out there.
Yeah, there's out there somewhere.